Hello and welcome to Analog Insights. In today's episode, I'm taking a closer look at the Light Lens Lab 50mm f1.9 rigid ZS, which is modeled after the famous Dallmeyer Super Six Anastigmat 50mm f1.9, originally released in the 1930s. And the 6 in the name of the original stands for 6 elements in 4 groups, so the optical design, and the super was referring to the unusually wide open f1.9 maximum aperture. This at the time where it was really unheard of to have these kinds of wide open lenses. Typically they ended at f3.5 or 4.5 or something in that area, and here you suddenly had an f1.9 lens. The original 50mm Super 6, it was produced by the British company Dallmeyer and hand finished with an accuracy of 1/500,000th of an inch, according to historical ads by the brand. And the lens is famous for its swirly bokeh and unique rendering with high center sharpness and painterly backgrounds. And of course, this makes the original a favorite among filmmakers, but also portrait photographers who cherish the special glowing skin tones that the original produces. And as a result of that, the original Super 6 will easily cost between $5,000 to $20,000 at auction, as tracked here by Collective Blend. And lenses in great condition will demand a premium and can go even higher. And part of the reason is that these were only produced in very small numbers for the Leica Thread Mount, which are of course still compatible until today. And alternatively, you can get a cinema mount lens and get it rehoused by specialist workshops such as Skyllaney or TMS. And all this, of course, was reason enough for Light Lens Lab, who are famous for these kinds of recreations, basically, of historical optical designs, to tackle this particular lens. They have been doing this for a while now and went through multiple prototypes and iterations to get it right, which I always appreciate about them. And in this particular case, they did something interesting. They took the established rigid housing that they have developed, and also where they put in the Summicron 50mm homage that I had discussed on the channel before, and now took the same, took another optical design for the Dallmeyer Super 6 and put it into the same housing. And this is what they call the rigid project, where they have a series of historical designs, optical designs, put in the same housing, because they believe they have created one of the best housings out there. It has been optimized already. And if it fits, then why not use it? And it's a little bit, the modular approach reminded me a little bit of the realm of watchmaking, traditional Swiss watchmaking, where you have kind of case makers and then you have movement creators and so on, and they're putting it all together and sell it under a certain brand. And here you have a similar approach that you say, okay, we already established the case or the housing and can put in different movements or optical designs. And of course, that also affects the price in a positive fashion, because you get economies of scale suddenly. Interestingly, Light Lens Lab releases this particular lens in 2 different versions. So there's a standard version with a more modern performance, and a low contrast version, which is much closer to the original and is advertised to offer film aesthetics. I originally wanted to test the low contrast version, but that was not available, so I got the standard version for this test here, and I tested it on my Leica M6 film camera. I took the lens with me on a recent trip to Japan, shooting all sorts of different black and white and color negative film. And as always, these films were developed and scanned by my trusted On Film Lab in Frankfurt. Let's dive in there. This 50mm f1.9 Super 6 homage feels very nice and high value. It weighs 263 grams and the outer barrel is made of brass, and all internal parts are either brass or aluminum. Optically, it is designed to retain the characteristic look of the original Dallmeyer Super 6 with its 6 elements and 4 groups design, but they try to make some improvements here and there, both optically and cosmetically. In terms of usability, of course, it's a different lens, and it is optimized for the use on modern digital cameras as well, but you can also see the performance difference when shooting a high-resolution Fuji Acros 100 film, for instance. The lens costs $799 or around 700 euro, and it is possible to find discounts here and there. And it comes with 2 different optical versions, which, as mentioned before, is quite interesting. So there is the standard version, which we have here, which comes with a little bit more sharpness and a modern touch to it. And the low contrast version, which is a little bit closer to the original optical design and offers a more advanced tonal range according to Light Lens Lab. And the low contrast version is signified with a star here around the front of the lens ring. The aperture closes down in half stops from f1.9 to f22, and the focusing ring comes with a classic design that we know from the original Summicron, and that was also present in the Summicron homage that I've discussed before. So this is the rigid housing that I briefly touched on before, and the focusing tab also comes with an infinity lock, which personally I really like, but that depends, and it's a matter of taste. The filter size is a classic 39 millimeters, and of course very handy. So what about the optical quality and results? I shot this lens extensively in Tokyo on high-resolution Fuji Acros 100 film, but also my classic Ilford FP4 or Kodak Go 200. And the results are simply stunning. The lens produces an amazing sharpness and clarity that immediately draws you into the frame, in my opinion. There's a huge difference whether you shoot the lens wide open at f1.9 or stop it down. Wide open, it is a true character lens and exactly what you would expect without feeling overly artificial or corrected deliberately in a bad way, but it really feels special and like it's aiming to reproduce the Dallmeyer Super 6 successfully. But once you step down, you get a really nice and sharp lens across the frame, a really solid performer, I would call it. Wide open, you can easily recreate the chromatic aberrations and glows around the edges, around your subjects. Even at larger distances, you can still see that here with that temple, for instance. And the results is, in my opinion, in a typical vintage effect without, again, feeling overly corrected or artificial. The most remarkable feature, in my opinion, is the beautiful, pleasing bokeh that really lives up to the original. It nicely isolates your subject. It is a little bit busy like the original. There is a lot going on depending on your background, but to me it hits a fine line between a very nice, smooth bokeh that draws you into the frame, that makes your subject stand out, and doesn't draw attention in an unnecessary or unpleasing way. Purists might appreciate that and see the reference, the successful reference here to the original Super 6, but there might also be some people who feel like it's too busy as a bokeh. This is, as always, a matter of taste. Personally, I think it really hits that balance of feeling nice and vintage without being overly busy and artificial, as sometimes happens with these kinds of lenses. I didn't observe any distortions or strong vignetting in my photos, and the color reproduction was really, really nice and perfect. I love the Kodak Go 200 shots from Tokyo with this particular lens. And especially the close-ups or those working with certain reflections, where I've tried to force certain reflections, worked really, really nice in my opinion. The lens handles high contrast also relatively well, especially when shooting it with the Fuji A-Cross 100, which is in general a high contrast film. And then if you have harsh sunlight, I felt that the whole range was captured accurately and nicely. I got a lot of gray tones in there, and to my eyes it gave the images a lot of depth. The propensity to ghosting and flaring is very low. That surprised me a little bit, so I tried to force this, but really needed to shoot directly into the sun to get some slight flaring. And optically, this is a stunning lens, and the results truly stood out when I received all the films back from my Japan trip. I could immediately see that those were taken with the Light Lens Lab because of the high contrast, the kind of quality that the images have, the sharpness, and of course the beautiful bokeh. So this is a really nice lens, and you get a lot of money, a lot of value for the money here. So what about the handling and my personal impressions? The form factor is exactly like my 50mm f2 Summicron homage that I had discussed before and that I really, really like. So I completely understand why Light Lens Lab is pushing the rigid housing here and using it for all sorts of upcoming lenses. This makes sense to me. I personally really appreciate the aperture ring, and also that it has visually this slight reference to the original MR lenses and then also to the classic Summicron. The same holds true for the focusing ring and also the focusing tab. I am a huge fan of such focusing tabs and also appreciate an infinity lock. I know it's a contentious issue in the community, so I won't go into details here. This is a matter of taste. The typographic elements and engravings on the lens are really beautiful in my opinion, in comparison to the recently released 35mm double spherical, where I complained in my review about that small detail that the M letter is a little bit larger and feels out of proportion. This is not the case here. Here they got it right. And the only small detail that I have to complain about here is that the selected aperture is only indicated with a drilled hole. And the problem that I have with that is not that in itself, but if you are in the f1.9 range, which of course you might be sometimes, it feels a little bit off to have right next to it another drilled hole with a screw in there and have a little bit of an asymmetrical, and a little bit weird look because of the two drilled holes. It looks unnecessarily busy to me. I know this is again a really harsh detail, but I noticed it and I found it a little bit unsettling. I would prefer something that is a bit cleaner, or then have another indication for the selected aperture. The front ring will look slightly different to my version here. Here it says R Super 6, which personally I really like, so I find it a bit unfortunate that the final production will look different. They discuss that in the development blog if you're interested about the details. And as always, you can get custom engravings for I think $110 US, which has a very nice touch and lets you use the lens to commemorate a special event or whatever. The front and rear caps are of high quality. I particularly like the soft fabric inside the front ring. It needed to be broken in a little bit, so at first I had some problems fitting it back on the lens. It was always a little bit off, but then once it's broken in, it fits perfectly and snuggles nicely into place. Personally, another detail, I'm not a huge fan of the engraving on the Light Lens Lab front caps, and they also scratch easily. I think they can do an even better job here visually, and in terms of the quality of the front cap. It's nice, but it could be a little bit nicer. The E39 filter size is perfect in my opinion, and especially if you have other Summicron lenses, it's the kind of filter size that is makes sense investing in when shooting a Leica M, in my opinion. So this is a nice touch if you add this lens to your collection, or this is your very first lens, it makes sense to invest in this kind of filter size as well. I personally love the beautiful shiny chrome look of this particular lens, and it works particularly nice with the black Leica M6 that I have here, also my M4II. But I can also imagine it working wonders on a classic Leica M3 or M2, or also on the silver version of the M6. That would also look very, very nice. So where do I stand on this particular lens? Personally, I can imagine that this is your only 50mm lens. So if you're starting out and looking at the market, I mentioned that before for the rigid Summicron homage, but I feel the same with the Super 6. If you appreciate this kind of vintage look when shot wide open and still want to have a solid performer once you stop down, then this is a really, really interesting lens. So I think it's not a niche lens that is only interesting for people who would usually collect the Super 6 and now they want an inexpensive alternative. Not at all, in my opinion. So this is a lens that is interesting for the general Leica M shooter and the 50mm shooter as well. But of course, if you are more like me and already have a collection of multiple 50mm lenses because it's your favorite focal length, then I think you can certainly add this one here to the collection, precisely because of that very nice, soft, glowy, wide open look that it can create, and also the kind of bokeh that it is capable of creating, especially at closer distances. It is certainly a special look that I personally appreciate, and I can't wait to shoot more with this lens. It's a beautiful lens, and of course there is increasing competition in this 50mm realm, especially at around f2 and a little bit higher, and yet I think the €700 price point is quite fair, and you do get quite a lot of lens for the money here, and it's a great deal in my opinion. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Analog Insights and my review of the 50mm f1.9 Super 6 homage by Light Lens Lab. I was asked via Instagram whether I would purchase the Super 6 over the Summicron homage, and I have to say this is a really, really tough one because I'm very fond of the Summicron homage that they had created earlier. And yet emotionally and right now at this moment in time, I'm very much drawn to the Super 6 and exploring it a bit more. It's a very nice lens. It comes with a very special optical design that creates fabulous images. And yet for me, as I've touched on before, it's not a niche lens. This is really a beautiful lens that everyone can be interested in. And as a result of that, for me, it might be the more interesting Summicron alternative, if you know what I mean, precisely because it gives you wide open, a more interesting look that is also a little bit busier and so on. So it has more character, as many people call it, the chromatic aberrations by now. But to me, it is the most interesting moment to have a camera that you're used to and combine it with a lens that is new to you. And this whole process of discovering and exploring that lens, and especially in this case where I'm very familiar with the form factor, focusing on the optical qualities of the lens and how it would perform on a certain film at closer distances, and how much glow and aberrations can I get out of it and so on. this is interesting to me. I know it's very nerdy, but this is what I appreciate about new lenses and exploring new lenses, and this is also why I sit down producing these extensive reviews, because this is where my heart is. And right now my heart is with the Super 6 to answer the question. So I would put my money there, and as mentioned before, it's a very interesting lens and you get a lot of lens for the money and a lot of optical quality, and you can see by now how much effort Light Lens Lab is putting into these iterations and making sure that they get it right, listening to community feedback in a humble way, and only releasing these lenses onto the market once they got it right. I appreciate that. I think that's unusual in today's market, where it's a lot about moving fast and being quickly on the market. I don't see that with Light Lens Lab, and I appreciate that. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please remember to like it and maybe even share it with your friends. And if you want to see more episodes like this, please subscribe to our channel. Jules, Greg, and I really appreciate each and every subscriber coming our way. So thanks for watching. I hope to see you soon.